Good afternoon, and welcome to Lessons Learned in Sex Ed, Why Girls Need Options. My name is Sheila Simmons. I'm going to be your moderator for this afternoon. I'm also a former director of education policy for the entity that became Children First. I'm currently Chief of Staff for Pennsylvania State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, and I'm also proud to be the author of a policy brief that will be released today, Informed and Empowered on Girls with Options. This is an important time and an important topic, and thank you so much for joining us. Before I introduce the others who will be participating today, I just wanted to underscore why we're here. So Children First has brought us together to discuss how we can ensure that girls achieve optimal health, specifically optimal reproductive health, around education about it and access to the full range of contraceptive options, including long-acting reversible contraceptive, LARCs, called LARCs. You'll hear a lot about that this afternoon, as well as implants and IUDs, so girls can decide what the best options for them when they are ready. We're also going to have a conversation with some of our key stakeholders around the region who will help, whose work needs to be informed by Girls with Options and what more needs to be done and what more looks like. Then we'll have a chance for everyone participating today to join the conversation, to raise questions and comments on what they've heard. We have about 120 people from throughout the region participating today. Everyone from stakeholders, educators, funders, health advocates, other experts, and of course, just citizens like you who know how important this topic is. So now I'm going to introduce the panelists who we'll have with us today. We have Colleen McCauley with Children First. We will have Dr. Cheryl Bettigole with the Commissioner for the Philadelphia Department of Health. We have Brittany Broaddus-Smith with the school district, with the School District of Philadelphia. We also have Dr. Tawanna Jones Morrison of Girls with Options. Then we'll have an additional 3 panelists later in our discussion. That will be Marisha, Marsh, Zaakirah, Hamid, and Cherice, Arrington. And then we'll have Tracy with the Women's Law Project. So we're going to start with Colleen McCauley from Children First, and she's going to discuss why we created Girls with Options. Colleen.
Hey, thanks, Sheila. Good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for being here this afternoon with us. But this has been a highly anticipated hour and a half here at Children First. And it was an event just like this that I attended in 2016 that ignited the spark for Girls with Options. And today, I would like us to set off lots more sparks and calls to action to continue to support the reproductive health of girls, especially girls who are Black and Hispanic and often experience disproportionate access to reproductive health information and services. That 2016 event that I attended was at the College of Physicians in Philly, and a small group of terrific advocates for girls was educating and urging for more contraceptive support for girls, particularly describing the safety of and the sound option for the long-acting reversible types of contraception, implants, and IUDs. 2 of those terrific advocates are attending today, Dr. Aletha Akers, who's currently at the Guttmacher Institute, and Melissa Wheeler-Gerber at Access Matters. I'm very grateful to you both. I was inspired by these advocates to find a way for Children First to meaningfully contribute to supporting teen girls' reproductive health, and our board was on board as well. So we added this as a goal to our strategic plan that very year, and we actualized our strategic plan by creating Girls with Options. And Dr. Tawanna Jones-Morrison is going to tell us more about the development of that program in just a moment. What Girls with Options is a powerful workshop for girls, particularly African American and Hispanic girls, that informs them of the full range of contraceptive options with a focus on the long-acting types, for the purpose of filling a gap in many girls' knowledge about these options. And Girls with Options also informed girls where to go to access contraception. And again, we aim to provide this information so that girls can decide what are the best options for themselves when they're ready. Before I turn the program back over to Sheila, I want to thank the law firm of Hangley, Aronchik, Siegel, Pudlin, and Schiller for their generous contribution to Children First to fund this Girls with Options program.
Thank you, Colleen. And certainly this work could not be possible with the funders who provide the support. So now we are going to hear from Dr. Cheryl Bettigole with the Health Department Commissioner. She's going to talk some about the data on contraceptives among teens and strategies to increase contraceptive use. Dr. Bettigole.
Great. So everyone, it's really a pleasure to be here. I apologize for the audio visual on this. I am at the airport working on an Afghan refugee evacuation effort, but hopefully you'll be able to see my slides and not look at me. Can you see those?
Yes, we can.
Right. And if I can get to the slideshow option, hopefully. Oh, this is always impossible. So sorry. All right.
There we go.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to walk through some data on contraception among teens in Philadelphia. Do that. Okay. So this is a graph of trends in teen pregnancy. I wish I could tell you that this is the result of specific concerted, well-designed programs, but we don't really have great data on why this happened. But you can see that there has been a very substantial, more than 50% decline in teen pregnancy. And you know, that's among Hispanic and Black teens in the city. You know, smaller declines, but still proportional declines among Asian and white teens in the city. So, you know, overall, the teen birth rate in Philadelphia fell from 60.2 per thousand to 25.7 births per thousand during the 10-year period 2007 to 2017. It was still higher than the national average. And we still see persistent disparities. You can still see, if I go back to this graph, that the numbers, although, you know, dropping substantially, much higher for Latino and Black teens than they are for white and Asian teens. So still a very large problem, although we do have this improvement here. When we look at condom use, we see a drop in teen condom use over the last 20 years. You know, still it wasn't perfect back in 2001, 2002, but still it was, you know, the majority of teens had used a condom at their last sexual encounter. We're now down to about half. So a real drop there that does matter both for pregnancy and of course for STDs. When we look at what teens say they're doing to prevent pregnancy, and of course this also relates to preventing STDs, we see that, you know, around half of teens have not had sexual intercourse. So those are the teens who are not at risk. But when you look at the teens who are having sexual intercourse, you can see that there are concerns about the type of contraception that they're using and the efficacy of that contraception. So, you know, the most common form of contraception in use is condoms. Although, you know, from the data I just showed you, you can see that not enough teens are using condoms. But the rates of use of the more effective means of contraception, so birth control pills, shots, patches, birth control rings, or IUDs or implants are all much lower. Tiny minorities of teens making use of those more effective means of contraception. you know, and actually even slightly higher numbers of kids using withdrawal as their means of contraception. So, you know, obviously this data is a little uneven. It varies between groups, but the overall message is that we aren't doing well enough at getting teens access to and use of the most effective means of contraception. I don't have specific data on LARC use, but it would be you know, it would be under the IUD or implant. So combined there, LARCs are going to be more common than IUDs in a teen population. So probably most of that, around 1%, is LARC use, but really nowhere near where our goal would be. So I apologize, I don't have slides on the health department programs to address this, but essentially what we're doing is more in the range of one-to-one counseling kinds of programs where people are referred, teens are referred and get services that way, rather than a citywide approach on LARCs. So I'm really interested to hear from the other speakers today and to think with you all today about what more can be done on this. And I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bettigole, and we appreciate you joining us from your current situation and the very important work that you're doing there. So next up, we are going to have Brittany Broaddus-Smith from the School District of Philadelphia. She's going to talk about what the school district does to support students who are parents, and also kind of where sex ed is now in the School District of Philadelphia. Brittany.
Thank you, Sheila. Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Broaddus-Smith. I'm the program manager for the Promoting Adolescent Student Health program. That is the district's HIV, STI, and unintended pregnancy prevention program. We are a grant-funded program funded by the CDC, the DASH department at the DASH office, excuse me, at the CDC. And we've had this grant for almost 20 years now. And I've recently taken over in 2019 as the program manager for this round of the grant cycle. And we've been able to see some amazing changes and implementations here since I've started, and our program has really been able to take in all of the good things that are happening at the district by way of where we were situated. In the beginning of our program, we were situated in the Student Health Services office, and then we spent some time in our Family and Community Engagement office, working directly with and being managed by Jennifer Pitt, who is the Director of Pregnant and Parenting Students. So we were able to directly connect the work and the purposes of our program with the work and purposes of the ELECTS program in the district. And as Dr. Bettigole mentioned she already broke down all of the stats, so I really don't have to get into that. But one of the greatest things that we were able to accomplish thus far with our program is an approved curriculum across the district, K through 12. There's a curriculum called the 3 R's, Rights, Respect, and Responsibilities, that was written by Advocates for Youth, Adolescent Reproductive Health, National Adolescent Reproductive Health Agency. We work directly with them to develop trainings for our staff and professional development. And the way we envision this program is like a wraparound service, if you will. So all of our students have access to this curriculum. We also support the teachers in ensuring that not only do they have the professional development to implement it with fidelity, they also have the tangible supports that's necessary. We understand that as teachers, things like markers and envelopes and things like that are hard to come by, and flip charts and things of that nature. And you may be asking yourself, why is that important for this type of discussion? But when it comes to sex ed, you don't want to cut corners. And so when we were able to remove any type of barrier that could possibly come up to prevent this curriculum from being implemented with fidelity, that way more students have access to it and have access to it well. And so that ultimately we hope, we won't know right out the gate, but ultimately we hope that will support the decrease in unintended pregnancies and things of that nature. Unintended, well, all STIs, I'm assuming, would be unintended, but things like STI transmission and things of that nature. We were able to bring together our School Health Advisory Council to do an immersion experience where those folks who are part of that board actually sat in and experienced the lessons and different aspects of the lessons K through 12 for them to approve it. And then now we are making sure it is our mission to anybody who is charged with teaching sexual health or the health unit at all, K through 12, whether that is classroom teachers or certified health teachers, and even some of our nurses, that they are trained in the work that we are, in the curriculum that we have selected, and make sure that they have the supports, not just informational, but really working on shifting the culture of sex ed in the district. That's really what we found to be more beneficial. We can get the facts and figures, we can get the numbers, we can check things off the check boxes, but if it's not really a cultural institutional change, that's why it's important our strategic partnerships with our Office of Prevention and Intervention to kind of look at the affective and mental health needs of our students, which also impact, risky sexual behaviors. We particularly post-COVID, or even steeped in COVID right now, some of the decisions that our young folks are making, we want to make sure that we have those supports ready for them in alignment with the CDC's whole school, whole community, whole child model, that every touch point where a student is, that there's either tangible, affective, or emotional and mental support to make sure that they have what they need. Regarding our pregnant and parenting students, our ELECT program is funded to support up to 1,000 young parents annually in public, charter, and accelerated and private schools. They work with more than 100 educational programs in the city. And there's also even a district policy 234, that outlines the educational rights of young parents, and ensure that Jennifer, as I mentioned, Jennifer Pitt, her team is very instrumental in making sure our the pregnant parenting teams that we know of are able to make sure any barrier that is presented is removed, and their team goes out of their way, not just in meeting the needs or the expectations of their grants, but really in an innovative way that meets the particular needs of our Philadelphia youth. If you've been in Philly for any amount of time, you know that Philly is special. And so issues that show up in Philly don't always show up in the same way in other places. And I believe that the work that we do with the PATCH program, as well as the ELECT program, it keeps that in mind. So everything that we do, every effort that we put out is with our students, particularly with our students in mind. And because Philadelphia students the Black and brown students make up a large part of the Philadelphia population, it is important that we have keep that mindset how our young students, our Black and brown students, are disproportionately at risk for certain things like unintended pregnancies, like STI transmission, and even other things that impact sexual behavior decisions like houselessness and food insecurities and all of those type of things as well.
Thank you so much, Brittany. I think we do have to remember that our schools are not just a place for science and math and reading, but sexual health is a topic that belongs there and is needed and is valuable. So next up, we're going to have Dr. Tawanna Jones Morrison. So Girls with Options is one of the big reasons why we're all here together. So I'm looking forward to her talking about Girls with Options and the work that they've done and what they've found and the recommendations that they're making.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this this extremely important conversation, as well as just thanking Dr. Bettigole and Brittany Broaddus-Smith for sharing that background information, which really sets the stage for the purpose of Girls with Options, but also not just the purpose, but the actual work that we did on the ground. So when we're thinking about Girls with Options, the most amazing thing to drive this conversation is that this program was created with Black and Hispanic girls, not for them, without them, but actually by them. Even the title Girls with Options was created by them, right? And so we worked with girls from each group, and we really listened to what they had to say about how they are obtaining information about reproductive and sexual health, their contraceptive options, who they're talking to, and listening to what they want information about, which was equally as important as the information that they already had, right? And we also talked to some extraordinary members of the sexual and reproductive health communities in Philadelphia. We actually had the opportunity to talk with Dr. Akers, who was with CHOP, but is currently at I can't say the name, Guttmacher Institute, I think it is. We also talked with Access Matters staff to get an idea of what are the important pieces that girls need, but also where can they get this information? Where can they get these resources? How can they access them? Because having information is great, right? Knowledge is great, but if they don't have the tools to access it or know where to go to get the resources, then again, they're at a disadvantage. It was great to hear about the work that the School District of Philadelphia is doing and providing this information, because it is true that things that happen in Philadelphia can be very different than things that happen in different places in the country or even the state of Pennsylvania. And the other thing that was really important about this work is that we did not ignore the history of Black and Hispanic women in reproductive health or the medical industry in general. And part of the conversation that we had with girls is, how did we get here? How are we so far removed from this reproductive health work? How are we so far removed from knowing what's going on in terms of reproductive health in our own bodies? And a lot of it is rooted in the discrimination and the harmful practices that were enacted upon Hispanic and Black women as they were used for tools for experimentation. So it was important for us to honor that information, because a lot of young people are bringing that information with them when they're thinking about, or when they're even contemplating what it means to take care of their reproductive health. So that creation of the program was essential, because we wanted it to be something that girls actually bought into and were willing to participate in. And with the help of, with the support and co-working with Jasmine Boyd, who was our other health educator, we were able to really engage with girls in a meaningful way. And in some cases, boys, right? Because schools didn't always want us to just come in and talk to girls, because then what were they going to do with their boys? So we were able to really have some really deep conversations to get a really broad understanding of what was happening in terms of reproductive health and awareness of sexual health in our communities. So we eventually ended up with a program that could be, or a workshop, a one-time workshop that could be offered in a 50-minute or 90-minute increment, because we did not want to be locked out of providing this vital information because of time frames. And so we were able to make it work for schools if they had a 45-minute class that they were offering to their students, or a block lesson, or if they could give us a whole day. And we offered this program for free to Philadelphia, any student, any child, young person in the city of Philadelphia from grade 6 through 12, essentially, was our service population. And what we did was we went into public schools, charter schools, after school programs, community behavioral health, any community behavioral health programs, any place where there were young people, particularly Black girls or Hispanic girls who we could share this information with. We did not turn down the opportunity to do that. When COVID came, we even did virtual sessions. So we tried to, quickly reconvene so that we could offer this in a virtual format. And we were even able to meet with girls in that capacity. And the program focused on the reproductive anatomy for females, which was a big thing that we found that girls did not have a lot of awareness about. Contraceptive options, the broad spectrum of contraceptive options, with the focus on long-acting reproductive contraceptives. And we really spent a lot of time talking about IUDs. And we also really centered reproductive planning. One of the things that we talked about with Dr. Akers was this idea of this cognitive planning, or this cognitive walkthrough, in order to give young people the opportunity to really think about and practice how they would access, discuss, and and utilize the information that they were being given. And over an 18-month period, we were able to service just over 700 young people in the city of Philadelphia, which is amazing, right? Given the fact that COVID-19 hit us really hard, and it took us a while in order to get up and running because of getting access into some schools. So we felt like we did a tremendous job. And I want to invite one of our participants, Brianna. She was a speaker. She did an interview in the beginning of the program with WHYY to talk a little bit about why this information is important, but she also was one of our participants in the program. So I'm going to ask her. Hi, Brianna.
Mm-hmm.
Hi,
Hi, Brianna.
if you could just share a little bit of a little bit with us about what your experience was with the program.
Yes. Hi everyone. The program was amazing. Girls with Options provided me with so much insight. Like Ms. Tawana said at the time, I was a teenager, and as of right now, I'm currently a nursing student, but this was before nursing school. So I wasn't really aware of my female reproductive anatomy, and I didn't really have great in-depth understanding of the different types of contraceptives, IUDs, birth control pills, etc. I knew what birth control was on the very surface level, but the workshop and just the program just provided me with just options, like the options that I had as a teenager, growing as a young woman inside this world. So I gained a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge, and yeah, that's my take on it.
Thanks, Brianna. Brianna has also worked as a facilitator at We.REIGN, which is the nonprofit organization that I am the executive director of. And she's been with us since she was a junior in high school, and now she's a junior in college. So she is really somebody that we rely on to give us feedback about our programming. And so when we talked to her about GWO, it was just exciting to hear that she was able to benefit from the information and then share that information with other girls in her life, which was also really important for us to know that this information wasn't just staying in the space where we were sharing it, but it was also being expanded into the communities where Black and Hispanic girls were spending their time. Some of the takeaways that really stood out for me included that one of the ones that was really big for me is that girls are not receiving information about how to take care of their reproductive health. They're not getting information about the need to visit a GYN. They don't have information about how they can use birth control in ways other than to prevent pregnancy. They're just not getting that information at all, which is critical, right? In order for girls to be able to take care of their bodies and be empowered to meet with when they're meeting with medical professionals to ask questions and get more information. One of the things that Brianna talked to us about, so I'm gonna ask you all to bring her back on the screen. One of the things that Brianna talked to us about was her experience with PCOS and a diagnosis that she received when she was a young person. And so Brianna, can you tell us what PCOS is and why it was important for you to understand how contraceptives or birth control could assist you?
Yes. So at the age of 14, I was diagnosed with PCOS, and I was directed a few years later down the road, I was directed to take birth control to manage my symptoms. But like I said, I didn't really have that much knowledge of birth control. I'll backtrack and explain what PCOS is. So PCOS is a hormonal disorder. Among young girls are usually diagnosed around, I want to say, teenage years, and this is basically your periods pretty much present as being irregular. It's the anatomy is that there are enlarged cysts on the ovaries, so symptoms can vary, but birth control works in a way to manage these symptoms and treat the symptoms. So birth control is an option for girls that do have PCOS. And I myself decided not to use the birth control for my own reasons, but I know it was nice to know that I still had that option from my healthcare provider. Like Ms. Tawana said, birth control is utilized for many different reasons, not just because someone, quote unquote, doesn't want to have a baby at the time. Even if that is the case, that should be enough, because birth control is reproductive freedom for women.
Great. Thank you, Brianna. And thank you for sharing that. We talked earlier about if she would be comfortable sharing about her experience, and she said that she would be brave and do that. And so I really appreciate you being vulnerable, Brianna. Other takeaways were this idea that we really need a robust, comprehensive sexual health programming in schools. And I was excited to hear that the Philadelphia Public School District is including nurses and other educators in their rollout for their sexual health program, Because one of the things that we know, or maybe many of us don't know, is that the sexual education usually begins and ends with physical education teachers, right? And so we have most physical education teachers are males, or people who identify as male or man. And it can be very uncomfortable for them to be providing this information to girls, right, about sexual anatomy, reproductive options, reproductive choices. And so it's really, and in high school, there's only in Pennsylvania, only a half credit of health is required, which is a half a semester of one school year, essentially. Our students should have more opportunities to learn about their sexual health. And we also need to make sure that we're broadening who is providing sexual health information to our students in school buildings and community settings, and just broadly across the board, because we don't want them to be limited to the 45 or 90 days that the health teacher has to talk to them about sexual health, drug abuse, general development, mental health, and all of these things, because sexual health is as important as any other form of development, right? It's a human process. It's something that we go through, and we need to be making sure that our students have more access to that information. Promoting or advocating for contraceptive equity is critically important. We saw earlier that condom use has declined among teens in the last 10 years, I think it was. And my very first session with a small group of girls, the thing that stood out for me was the very broad statement, Dr. Jones, nobody uses condoms, was literally what I was told in the very first session. I was so stunned that it took me a few moments to gather myself to know what was going to be my next thing to say. But what we know is that condoms are readily available. You can go to any school, any nail salon in the city of Philadelphia, and you can find or get access to condoms for free. But if young people aren't using them, then it's not a good use of our funding, and it's also not a good use of the resources that we're providing to them. Girls need access to contraceptives that they can control, that they can manage. It's a safety issue, it's a health issue, and it's an issue of equity and liberation, as Brianna pointed out, and control of my own body, right? My own bodily autonomy. It's not an easy conversation all the time for girls to have with people about with their partners asking to them to use condoms. And so to just provide condoms and assume that that's going to be the answer to the question is problematic. And one of the things that Brianna and I talked about was her experiences in schools prior to the new curriculum that has been rolled out, when they were talking to the students about STDs and condom usage. Brianna, can you share what you told me?
Yeah, so I remember being in high school, and once a year, a program, I can't recall their name for some reason, but they were doing pretty commendable work. They would come and offer free STD testing for all the students. And before the testing occurred, they gave a presentation and emphasized how utilization of condoms is a type of contraceptive is so important. And of course, the focus on condoms was important, pertaining to the fact that the topic was preventing STIs and STDs. But I noticed that there was never anyone that came in to talk about girls having options to utilize contraceptives such as birth control. I never heard too much about birth control, but I do recall condoms being offered on numerous occasions in high school for free, but resources for contraceptives were not even discussed at all. And there are so many resources and quick access to condoms, but not as much discussion in regards to birth control, and both fall under the umbrella of contraceptives.
Right. And so what we really were trying to, thank you, Brianna. What we really were trying to do was fill this gap, right? Because if every problem is a nail, if you only have a hammer, then every problem is a nail, right? Is what they say. And that's also true with only offering condoms. we want to make sure that girls are aware of the variety of options that are offered to them. And we have to ramp up the way that we talk about contraceptives to young people so that they are, in particular, our Black girls and our Hispanic girls, because what we see from the data is that while there has been a decrease in teen pregnancy, there is still a large disparity between what teen pregnancy rates for Black girls and Hispanic girls. So that idea of promoting contraceptive equity is really important to us. And that was an important takeaway from this program, because we want to help girls be able to advocate for themselves around contraceptive equity. And then finally, this idea of reproductive planning. When we're talking about reproductive planning, we're talking about from beginning to end. We often think about graduations and we think about our prom dresses, but girls are not equipped to have these conversations about what is their reproductive plan. What I learned from an article that just came out the other day for a school psychologist is that 50% of teenage females and 43% of teenage males endorsed in a study that they did not receive information about birth control before they had sex for the first time. And so this means that we're really missing the mark. Young people are not having discussions with their partners, their parents, or their pediatricians before they engage in sexual intercourse, which ultimately puts them at a higher risk across the board for sexually transmitted infections, sexually transmitted diseases, and unintended pregnancy. And we want to really help young people make this decision early on about what is your plan. Part of the activities that we did was thinking about, at what age do you think you would want to have a child if you want to have one, right? And then, so what would be if you said 25 and you were 16, well, what is your 9-year reproductive plan? Let's look at these reproductive options, these contraceptive options, and figure out which one will best meet your needs. And then let's have that practice having that conversation with your provider and your partner, right? So we're actually walking them through having that conversation. Stephen, would you bring up the slides for us to just show, just so we can share again or reiterate what the takeaways are? So again, we want to make sure that contraceptive equity is the goal. We want to make sure that there is an understanding, right, of reproductive organs and the significant health problems, or taking care of your reproductive health, which is a critical aspect of health in general, but also our sexual health development. We want to make sure that reproductive planning is an option and that we're walking girls through that. And just, really focusing on expanding the resources, the people, the opportunities for young people to be in conversation about sexual health and their sexuality with respect to their reproductive choices and contraceptive options. And as we go to our next slide, we can see overall what are the programmatic takeaways. And those included just really thinking about how we are going to get to young people so that we can have this conversation with them about contraceptive options. So we need a bold public health campaign, because what we heard is that girls aren't taking responsibility for contraceptives, boys aren't taking responsibility for contraceptives, and based on the research, they're not even getting information about contraceptives prior to engaging in sexual intercourse. This idea of increasing reproductive health and knowledge about sexual health, and really helping young people to understand the benefits of long-acting reproductive contraceptives in their reproductive planning and in their life over time. What we know about LARC is that primarily older women who are more settled or already have children use LARC because they understand the benefits of it, but it is safe and approved. The American Academy of Pediatrics has said that this is a safe method for young people to use. We want to make sure that all girls, but specifically Black girls and Hispanic girls with this project, have the tools that they need to advocate for themselves with their partners, with their practitioners, and if and when necessary, with their parents. right? And then really just addressing some of these implicit biases that we see that keep young people, particularly young Black girls and young Hispanic girls, from actually accessing reproductive health services. These recommendations can really help to shift those disparities that we see, but also create a healthier community for our young people overall.
Thank you so much, Tawana, for all of that information. I just can't say enough about the program Girls with Options. It's the work you've done is real, it's relevant. Brianna, you are awesome. I'm excited that you are going to stay in the health. You're a true asset to us in that regard. Okay, so now we're going to take about the next 10, 15 minutes or so, talking about the report, Informed and Empowered. And if you missed the takeaways and the recommendations that Tawana just discussed, we are going to share with you a link for the report, so you will be able to find those recommendations in there. So next up, we are going to have a panel that they're going to talk about anything in the report that they found particularly insightful, important, how they think this report is going to inform their work, as well as other insight that they want to provide. And so we'll be hearing from Cherice Arrington, who's the Associate Director of Programs and Advocacy with Girls, Inc. And then we're going to hear from Zaakirah Hamid, Sexual Educator at Access Matters, and Marisha Marsh, Director of Training and Capacity Building at Access Matters. So Cherice, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Colleen, Dr. Tawana Jones, Morrison, for inviting me to be a part of this wonderful discussion. I'm speaking on behalf of Girls in Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey. Healthy sexuality is definitely a topic that we are very strong and we believe in. As a national organization, I really appreciate the report that you put together and all of the research that you put into it, and really to support the need to have more comprehensive healthy sexuality programs. So as an organization, we really believe in teaching girls to have and gain more skills, knowledge, and support to take charge of their health and avoid risky sexual behavior. We believe in having a comprehensive health education program that is age and developmentally appropriate for all girls from kindergarten to 12th grade. Because as we know, it's such important that we train and we educate parents to have those conversations with their girls pre-puberty, and a lot of times adults are not have that confidence to have those conversations. So we have a program that does that for our 9 to 11-year-olds. And then we also, just like the wonderful program like the school district offers, we have a program called Informed and in Charge, which is for middle schoolers, 12 to 14. And then for our high school girls, 15 and 18, called Taking Care of Business. And just like these programs, we are talking about STI prevention and contraceptives. And I think it's really important to bring in all of those partners and get trained professionals to lead these conversations. But it's also important to bring in people in the community who are the parents, who are other leaders, to have those conversations with the girls. And I appreciate that Girls with Options also has a student who is an advocate who's coming and working with the girls. Mm-hmm. So in our program, we are really teaching the girls to focus and being leaders and advocates for their own health. We want to make sure that this research curriculum is being taught to all girls. We want to be able to make sure that it's inclusive for all girls. Not just for those who, gender-wise identify as a girl. For LGBTQ and inclusive sexual education is important. We want to support improved access for young people to quality and culturally responsive sexual health care services. So when we think about a comprehensive healthy sexuality program, from our take as an affiliate, we also think it's important to have conversations about consent. What does communication look like? So if you are going to have that or take that step to being sexually active, are you asking the right questions? Do you know about your reproductive health and how do those body parts work and function? We also go into what is healthy relationships. All of these conversations, including your values, are such an important thing that I think should be included in the comprehensive health education, as well as talking about contraceptives and about STI prevention. It's important for girls to know that any choice that you take can have a long-term effect or short-term effect on your goals. So I am definitely thankful that, that this is a conversation that we as organizations can work collectively and bring in different partners so that we can do the work that is needed to fill in those gaps, to reach those communities, especially those that are underserved. And I think it's important that when we think about serving those communities, is to really think about that our programs cannot be a one and fit for all. We have to tailor them. We have to have conversations within these different communities and be flexible to tailoring them and being culturally responsive. How do we do that is the question, and not so much taking this is what they need, but more of we're working hand in hand and we need to be able to address these issues and we want your input. The last point I do want to mention, I really love the fact that you talked about teaching girls to be advocates. And this is a very important point. I think there is so much potential in having girls be peer leaders. I think it's so important to have girls who can learn from each other, to learn about the policies and how those policies are affecting them, but also to be the ones who are speaking up and saying that I would like to have more comprehensive health education at my school. I want to be a part of those conversations. And I believe as organizations, we need to include them in our program planning. We need to have them at the table. We need to encourage them to reach out. And we need to create a space for them, because we can't do this work alone. And we know that our teams, just as you mentioned, Dr. Jones, is that, they helped come up with the wonderful ideas for your program, as well as the title, that the girls, they have this information, but we need mentors to coach them. So again, thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing what the other panelists have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Cherice. So Zaakirah, over at Planned Parenthood, how would you say the information in the report and some of the viewpoints that the girls shared while they were doing their work with Girls with Options, has that informed your work? And particularly when you are, you're trying to keep donors and funders, and was there anything that they that was in the report that you think might inform funders and others who support the work that you do?
Yes, absolutely. Again, first to begin, thank you, Advocates for Youth, for having me, and to Dr. Tawanna Jones-Morrison for sharing your findings, and to my co-panelists, thank you for the invaluable work that you do. And to answer your question, thinking about the statements from the previous speakers, the theme that comes to my mind is pleasure without consequence. Sadly, that's a bold statement, and Philadelphia girls deserve this possibility. I am, as an educator, I'm often reminded that for Black and Latino women and girls, pleasure on your terms is sadly a revolutionary idea. I can recall on several occasions as an educator, when we get to the topic of contraception, I've observed a few responses, the youthful giggles and snickers, because this feels fun and funny and exciting. The shy looks away because this is taboo. And yeah, we learned this last year, just don't get pregnant. But when I ask the girls, why do people have sex? There's always a pause, And then I see the thoughts begin forming in their heads. And I'll often get responses like, because folks are in love, because they're in a committed relationship, and that's what you do, because of curiosity. And the responses will continue on, but often the response that I never hear is because sex is pleasurable. And when I offer that response as an option, the giggles quiet. The shy looks turn into serious stares. And the what were once nonchalant eye rolls come forward and back straighten up, because as Tawana mentioned, there is a historical basis as to why Black and Latino girls cannot and do not discuss sexuality, including pleasure. So to be direct and specific about working to
I think you lost sound. I'm sorry.
Sorry about that. I somehow got on mute. But to reiterate, I say the specific statement, pleasure should not have to be whispered. We can begin to create advocates and support body autonomy and make consent sexy and make healthy relationships our girls' relationship goals when we remove stigma, create trust, and remind young girls that they are powerful thought leaders and they do deserve pleasure without consequences. When this happens, something magical also happens, and girls become invested in not only their reproductive health care, but the needs of their peers as well. As educators, it's important that we don't forget to listen, learn who we are serving, and meet the youth where they are, to demonstrate respect and to remember that young people have the right to autonomy even when we disagree with their choices. Because when Black and Latino girls have the space to be themselves and see themselves, they often don't need to be reminded to be their own advocates. They'll ask for what they need. They'll seek out the trusted adults to get the care that they want and deserve, including long-active reversible contraception. And this leads me into what we need to further this work. For Pennsylvania, on a macro level, we need legislation. We need legislation for more comprehensive reproductive education that centers talking about how to access healthcare, including abortion care. On a micro level, we need resources to first make sure basic needs are met. Young people, specifically Black and Latina communities in Philadelphia, are systemically disadvantaged, and it is extremely difficult to think about how to access care and think about body autonomy and think about consent and healthy relationships when your basic needs are not met. So that is one of our first needs. Also, we need access to professional development opportunities to continue to always grow and improve as educators and advocates. We need opportunities to have our programs reviewed for feedback from the young people that we serve, because quite frankly, if we're not meeting their needs, what's the point? And lastly, we need support from families, from school systems, from community organizations, and funders to continue the vital work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zaakirah. Marisha, your Director of Training and Capacity Building at Access Matters. So what is the value added for a report like this, and what more is needed from where you sit?
Yes, thank you. And hi, everyone. One, just want to express my gratitude for all of the great comments that have been made so far, to my colleagues who are, invested in this work. So yeah, one thing that I will say is that, it's always really exciting for me to see more curricula being designed by the people that the program is intended to impact. So whenever we see that, I think that it shows that we're moving in the right direction, right? I think that a huge theme around this report is education, right? We know that when Black and brown women have the information, the adequate information, they know how to make the proper decisions for themselves, right? We don't talk about this stuff often enough, so there are a lot of questions that go unanswered. But one thing that I really wanted to touch on was that, within all this education, right, it's not just giving them facts about birth control, right? They're also having an opportunity to engage with people who look like them, right? Who may come from similar backgrounds as them, around so much more than just long-acting reversible contraceptives or condoms, birth control methods, right? Like there are so many, as health educators, when we're teaching this kind of content, there are so many teachable moments that pop up, right? Where like, and I think like if you teach young people, sometimes you'll see it where like this light bulb goes off, where they realize like, oh, wow, and so much of that is related to like communication, how they deal with relationships, their mental and emotional health, right? And how those things interplay with their sexual and reproductive health. So like, for example, I remember once we were doing a session, we had a few sessions with a group of girls, doing some evidence-based sexual health intervention. And there was one girl she was a really nice girl. She's also very bright. But she started coming to sessions and she found that she was like extremely down, right? Like just like very sad. She started feeling really lethargic, didn't really want to like communicate with people. And, because we had been in about 2 to 3 sessions with her so far, like she started kind of opening up, and she's expressing to us that like, I go home and like, I just have an attitude all the time. Like I'm always so angry and I don't know why. It's making my partner upset. It's making my family upset to the point where she's close to tears. And it wasn't until like, I think that next session where we actually talked about birth control, right? That she started to realize that, it could possibly be the depot shot that I'm taking, right? The birth control method, and that I have options where I could try something that may not affect my mood in the way that it is. And it was like watching her like realize that like there's actually something that I might be able to do about this. I thought there was just something wrong with me, that I was just walking around with this attitude. But without that information, she was unable to come to that conclusion that this might be something that I can actually fix, right? And that ties into the autonomy, right? So when we give people the proper information, we also have to be able to trust that they can make the decisions for themselves that they need to for their own well-being. And, as I think about like how we can build upon this work, like I always go back to the mental and the emotional, right? Like one thing that I thought was like really interesting, and I like that it was stated just so bold and plainly, that like girls don't feel like they're responsible, for contraceptives, and the boys don't feel like it. So I can only imagine the conversations or the lack of conversation that's being had when you have 2 young people who have decided to, be intimate with each other, right? And also recognizing like the difficulty that comes with even having that conversation. When you have that information that I can use these things to protect myself, but you don't really know how to advocate for yourself, right? Or how to bring that up to your partner, or you find yourself trying to have the discussion at that wrong moment when it's a little bit too late and things have already gotten a little hot and heavy, right? Like, just kind of preparing themselves for those kinds of conversations. I think that like the more we create curricula like this that's designed by and for the people we're aiming to serve, the more we're going to be able to kind of plug in that information that they want to know about, right? I think Tawana mentioned that. So not just teaching the things that they need to know, but what are the things they really want to know? Like, and I'll say this as well is when I go into rooms with like young Black and brown people, and, I might ask them like, why do you think I'm here today? What are we going to talk about? And they might know that, sex ed, sexual health, but the way the conversation develops, you really start to see how curious young people are, that they really actually want to know this information. And they want to have these conversations with people who can give them valid information, who have seen things and gone through things and can actually like affirm them or, I guess debunk some myths that they may be hearing from friends, So just taking advantage of those spaces for those conversations around not just reproductive health, but personal healing. And I'll say this last point, just to not to go on for too long, but I think another thing that really does impact a person's ability to plan, like set reproductive health goals and things like that, really has to do with like their own level of like self-esteem, right? And like how much like how capable they feel of actually advocating for themselves, right? Like, and this goes back to like, do they even have their basic needs, right? So if I don't have like, if my basic needs aren't being met, then I'm not thinking about planning for the future. And then that's when life just kind of starts to happen to you, right? So we also have to consider, like, are these young people in a position to really like plan, and how are we like helping to provide them with the services or resources they need to start thinking more critically and intentionally about what they want the next 5 years of their life to look like, and so on and so forth. So.
Thank you so much, Marisha. Cherice, Zaakirah, and Marisha, thank all of you for this insight that you provided, as well as kind of laid a path for us as well in terms of what we need to be doing next. So we have one more speaker before we're going to open this up to questions from both our online survey as well as the viewers who are watching us on Zoom. So our last speaker, Cheryl, Tracy. Cheryl, I see. I see you. So Cheryl is with, there you go. Cheryl, Senior Law Project, is that right?
Women's Law Project.
Okay.
Yes.
So she is going to, okay, so she has the job of putting all of this in context for us. And what a time to put it in context, because there are probably people and policymakers who are working right now to limit the reproductive rights of women and girls. It's been such an attack on it lately. And so can you just provide us a context of how this work that we've been doing and what we need to do now, how do we get here? Where do we go from now based on what's going on?
Well, we're in a pretty serious place right now. But what I want to say, first of all, to all of our listeners, that abortion is legal. It's accessible in Pennsylvania. If you are young people, you need parental permission. And if you can't get parental permission, judicial bypass is available for you for abortion. And I'm going to give you a number, and Donna is going to send you some more information about what the judicial bypass system looks like. But if you have information that you need right now, our number is 412-281-3048. Because what is going on in Texas, if you are not aware of it, and I'll talk a little more about it in a few minutes, is yet another effort to limit access to abortion. And let me assure you, as we are talking this wonderful conversation about improved access to contraception, understand that's on the line also. But what I want to start with is taking you back to when I was a teenager, because it really wasn't that long ago, although probably you'll think so when I tell you how old I am eventually. But when I was a teenager, abortion was a crime. But women still had them, and women still had them even if it endangered their lives. And the only birth control that was available was a condom. And you've been talking about condom issues, and we know both the lack of reliability, the lack of use of them, and that it is a method, but a method with a lot of failures. If you were in school and got pregnant, you were thrown out of school. The chances of finishing high school or going to college or law school were dramatically reduced if you got pregnant when you were a teenager. Many teenagers unwillingly were forced to give up their children to adoption by their parents. Teen unmarried pregnancy meant shame and punishment. And even if you were an adult and unmarried, in the workplace, once you got pregnant, you frequently lost your job with no legal protections whatsoever. And then in 1965, the birth control pill was finally developed and became available. And in 1973, abortion was no longer a crime because the US Supreme Court ruled that it was a fundamental right of privacy in the United States Constitution to have this control over one's body, and in consultation with a healthcare provider, not a cop, not law enforcement. So these two events so dramatically changed the landscape of opportunity for women and girls. in the United States, and in many other what we call developing countries around the world, because we also know that this is an area in many countries where access to contraception or abortion are still criminalized. So women, for the first time in history, at least the history that we know it in Western society, had the opportunity to fully participate in society on an equal footing with men. But many men did not like the notion of women as equal and have been waging a war against reproductive choice since that time. There, were all the sayings of we need to keep women barefoot and pregnant. And I'm sorry to say that there are also women who still believe that men are the rulers, and that they are superior to women and don't support equal rights for women. So, and I also need to say, and that's why I really like the tenor of this program about options, that there certainly are people who support access to contraception, access to abortion care, who themselves won't use it. But they understand that the choice belongs to the individual, not to the government. And I will also tell you, over the years, we at the Women's Law Project, and I'll tell you more about us in a minute, but we have gotten calls from parents who have wanted to force their daughters to have either use contraception or to have an abortion, and they can't do that. That's against the law also. You have choices and you have options. But I also, most of the political emphasis that is going on in this country is going on issues connected to abortion. But the same people, the major people who oppose access to abortion also oppose access to contraception, only they're not as loud about that. They don't talk about that as much. So that's something that I think is really important to keep in mind. And of these people, we know if they really cared about life, we would not have the outrageously high infant and maternal mortality rate that we have in this country. Issues that so disproportionately affect people of color. We would not have hungry babies and children and mothers. We would not have children waiting at the border for their own safety, or not being allowed into this country. The movement to end abortion is not about protecting life. It is about controlling women and girls. And now we have Texas. And if you don't know what's gone on in Texas, they've created a law that allows private individuals to essentially become volunteer detectives and investigate friends and strangers seeking an abortion. And in doing so, getting $10,000 for intervening, for turning them in. The Texas legislation is about an abortion ban at 6 weeks. And most women don't even know, and particularly teenagers whose schedules and cycles are so off that they don't even know that they're pregnant at 6 weeks. It's a terrible, terrible law. And President Biden is now appealing it with our Justice Department. But there's another case out of Mississippi that's coming before the Supreme Court this year. And there's now a majority on the Supreme Court who at least appear to want to overturn Roe v. Wade. So we've had lawyers who have been working since 1973 to really preserve the fundamental right of privacy about reproductive health decisions. I'm 75 years old. I knew what it was like before. And I tell you, I will fight to my last breath to preserve this right. But my past should not be your future. It can't be your future. We need more activist citizens. We can't rely on the lawyers alone. It's your future that's at stake. And it goes so much further beyond having access to contraception and abortion. It really it goes to your full participation in society. It goes to the equality of women. So we need you We need your parents. We need your grandparents. We need all your friends and allies to fully understand how much is at stake here. And all the good work that you're currently doing is really in jeopardy. And I'm not the kind of person that says the sky is falling. This stuff is real and it is really serious. And even though the vast majority of people in the United States support access to contraception, the overwhelming majority, access to abortion, the political forces around it are very, very different. And they are really pushing back in ways that are very, very dangerous. There's no excuse for people who are eligible to vote to not vote. It's absolutely essential. So again, I just want to assure you that in Pennsylvania, and we are now fighting, we are in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to protect the right for Medicaid funding for abortion. We will fight every right we can in our state. And right now, we have a governor who will veto all this awful legislation because legislators in Pennsylvania are lining up. They already have a 6-week ban. We have terrible laws, but do not ever think that contraception isn't next in line. And do not ever think that women have not become the political footballs around this issue. So this has been so positive up to what I'm saying to you. And I really feel bad about being forthright about it, but it's something that young people need to know. Your future is really at stake. So I really thank you for inviting me to be this. And, you're our future and we're counting on you. So
Thank you so much, Carol. No, it's information that needs to be said. That's why we wanted to end our panel part with the context that you made it very clear how crucial this time is and how crucial this work is. So we're gonna spend like the next 10 minutes or so with doing a Q&A. We have had some questions that folks have provided to us in our messages, as well as some from online. I know that Carol from the Women's Law Project talked about parents, but another question that came through was, are you getting buy-in from parents? So Tawana, what's parent buy-in been like on this work?
I'll also invite Jasmine, who was the other health educator, to also add to this answer if possible. Our experience was that we primarily went through the schools to provide the service. Schools did, to my knowledge, at times, depending on the school, share with parents that their children would be receiving sexual health education from an outside agency. Jasmine worked with older teens a lot and parenting youth. So if you could share your experience, Jasmine.
Yeah, so for some of the classrooms that I did go into and share this lesson plan with, some of the teachers had already gotten parent signatures for them to be able to participate in this, or at least receive some form of verbal confirmation that their students can participate in it. So I, for the most part, parents were pretty okay with at least getting information about it. I don't think I've received any parents who wanted to know more specifically what we were talking about or wanted to know prior to confirming that their student could be a part of it.
Here's another question I think would be perfect for Jasmine, partly because I already know the answer, but how do you approach helping girls to figure out what they want sexually and how to say yes or no to sexual contact at any time? How'd you approach that, Jasmine?
So mostly just talking to them about what they prefer. And a lot of them are already know or have an idea of what it is that they want to do. Sometimes they can feel a little bit, I would guess, encouraged by a partner at times. And then we've had conversations centered around like, if this is something that you want and how you can express that you don't want to. So how you can say your no, how you can get the consent for engaging in this if you want to and when you want to. And a lot of our talks are just, like we said, about options. What do you want to do? Because this is your decision to make. Ms. Tawana can't make it, Ms. Jasmine can't make it. It's for you to make. We can only give you the information that you need, or if we don't have that information, point you in the right direction. And it's, like we said, all in the form of advocating for yourself and what you want. And a lot of times we push this idea that this is not the first and the last time that you will be able to make these options about things. So when we talk to the girls within the ELECT program who are pregnant and are about to have children, just about, okay, so you're going to have to make decisions regarding your health when you're in labor and delivery, as well as for your child's health. So how this can be a working thing for you to be able to kind of advocate for the things that you want in different aspects of life.
One of my favorite parts about your work was you would ask girls, well, when do you want to have kids? And they would say, oh, 10 years from now. And then you'd say, well, why aren't you using a contraception that, is going to keep you safe for 5 years? And that would lead them to the LARC. So can you talk a little bit about how their future plan and what they saw as their future, how that planned into the types of contraceptions they use? Either of you.
I think, well, so yeah, that was like one of the best parts of the program when we got to the end and we would ask them that question, because everybody, this is all very, contraceptives are very theoretical, right? For a lot of people. Obviously, as we look at pregnancy rates and STIs and STDs rates, right? And so really to put it in their laps and say, okay, now we've had this large conversation, you know what you can do. So what's your plan? And the most interesting conversations were with the girls who said they never wanted to have children, because then you need a lifelong reproductive plan. And so then when you really start thinking about that, and we talked a lot about what's a perfect user versus the typical user, right? A perfect user is every time we have sex, they have their condom, their contraceptive ready to go. It's always there, but most people are not perfect users of anything. And so really, that's when you saw all the light bulbs start to come on. Like, yeah, we've heard all of this before. Condoms, yep, birth control, yep, know where to get that. Planned Parenthood, okay. But then when you say, okay, so now let's write up the plan. Let's think about this. You know what kind of fabric you want for your prom dress. You know where you're going to get the beads from. You know how much it's going to cost. Let's talk about our reproductive health that way. And it totally shifts their perspective from, hey, this is theoretical to, wait, this is the real thing that I'm now in charge of.
Thank you. I want to take one of the questions from our online survey. Someone asked, and I'll close this to interview. What do you wish adults in your life did differently to support you in this area, in this work? You work with teens. What do you wish adults did differently? Anyone who works with?
I work with teens, and I'm sure any one of our panelists could hop in. That's
from school district.
I think that I wish adults would listen more, close their mouths more, and make the space safe. One of the trainings that I had taken prior to ever doing this work was being a, I can't remember what it was called. It's like a safe adult, right? Making yourself a safe adult. So when a child comes to you and says, and this has happened to me, Dr. Jones, I performed oral sex on somebody this morning. And you're like, oh, okay. So tell me about that. Versus what? This anger, these things that come, these emotional responses, we have to really learn how to temper that. So it's really about our own regulation, right? When we hear these things, we have to practice that same stuff that we're trying to get them to practice. Otherwise, they don't come to us anymore.
I would also agree with that, with what Tawana said, is that as adults, it's so important to listen and to know that if a child or a teen is coming to you, it's because they trust you. And they want to hear something from you to whether it's giving me some information, whether it's I'm talking to you about, I'm going through this situation. I think a lot of times as adults, we try to push our values onto children. And I think it's so important to empower and advocate and teach our teens to advocate for themselves. What decision do you want to make? And give them the facts. Here are the facts of everything. Here are your choices. And I'm here to be a coach, a mentor, a support. I'm not going to judge you. I know in the Girls Inc. space, the very first thing is creating a safe space. We create group guidelines together. We say, what is said in here doesn't leave the room. You can talk to me at any time, but it's also the feeling of, you're hearing a lot of different messages from your friends, from the media. Some of it is false. A lot of it is false. And some of it is true. But you know what? Also as an adult to understand that we were once teens too. And we had to learn these messages. For myself, I'll speak personally. It was from, going through different situations. I didn't have a trusted adult that I could go to. So I think we're in a perfect time within our programs to create those spaces where as adults to not be judgmental, and also to give them the resources to support what we are talking about, because they love to read. We need to trust that they are listening to us and that they are hearing us.
So before I turn this over to Colleen, I'm going to ask one more question. So Girls with Options, I know you were in a number of schools, programs. So folks who are listening, who are saying, I would love something like that in my kids' school, my kids' after school program or rec center or wherever. Where could they find, if not Girls with Options, programs like this?
So actually my nonprofit organization recently received a grant from Quaker Quarterly Meeting to continue the Girls with Options work. So we will be looking to train some young people like Brianna in the Girls with Options curriculum so that we can offer it in after school programs. And if Ms. Jasmine is available in during school programs, to make sure that we continue pushing the work forward, because it's so important. So they can actually go to the We.REIGN Inc. website or follow us on social media to learn more about, or to reach out to myself so that we can schedule time to discuss how we can bring the program to them. And if I could just add one thing to your last question, I just wanted to reiterate what Zaakirah said. And I think that one of the other important things that we can do as adults, and I think Ms. Jasmine and myself did this relatively well, is honesty, right? Everybody is not having sexual intercourse because they want to have a child. Everybody is not having sexual intercourse because they love people. Some people are having sex because it feels good, and we need to figure out how to manage that and be truthful with youth about that, because if we tell the lie, then we never get the interaction. And I think that Girls with Options really was able to do that in a very authentic way with the girls and the young and the boys that we serve. So I just wanted to highlight that as something that really stood out.
Thank you. Thank you, Tawana. Thank you to everyone who provided questions. I'm going to pass this back over to Colleen. Back to you, Colleen.
Okay, so we're really not ready to end. There's a
I know.
But we're at the ending time, right? And as promised, speakers and folks who are participants on this call have given us a lot to think about and a lot of actions to take. And so I want to I want to make sure to mention that we have a concrete action for everyone to take. Children First is an advocacy and policy organization. So we are asking you to raise your voice to urge that school districts in the region and across the Commonwealth are able to augment their sexuality education offerings. And Access Matters has a petition available for us all to sign to create more robust sexual health education in school districts across the state. And we're dropping that link, right? It just takes a minute, dropping that link in. So if you click on that, before you leave this meeting, then you can go sign that petition right away. So please take a moment to do that. Also, the report on girls with options that Sheila Simmons wrote for us is out now. And so we'll drop that in the chat as well, a link so you can even get more details about what was done. And again, hear the recommendations repeated there that Tawana shared with us today. Okay, so I have a lot of takeaways, right, from today. Some next steps that need to be done. We need to prepare more girls as peer leaders and mentors. As Zaakirah so memorably stated, that we should stop half whispering about pleasure. So talking about that girls deserve pleasure and how to secure that. Again, access to comprehensive reproductive education in our schools, even more than what we have. Both Marisha and Zaakirah importantly urged working to help support girls get their basic needs met, which includes emotional and social support, and creating safe spaces to have these conversations. And then I heard a couple of folks urging that there be more financial support for this work. All the speakers today have programs that advance this work, so it's critical. Again, as Carol put it, everything in context for us on this session, to keep raising our voices for women and girls. And I'd also like to very much thank Sheila Simmons, who facilitated this session, and for writing the report and all the advocacy you do to support and lift up girls. Thank every one of our speakers on this session, and to all of you for sharing your time and for raising your voices to take these next action steps.